welcome back to the Natural History Cupboard podcast, a place where the weird and wonderful parts of nature and science reside. I'm your host, Gareth, and with me, as ever, are my two co-hosts. Aaron, say hi.
Dr. Owens, Dr. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you. And Andrew, say hi.
Hello. I'm not going to go down Aaron's route. Hello.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit weird. I mean, well...
None of us are doctors.
No,
definitely not.
Welcome to episode 2. I never thought we'd make it this far. Let's hope it keeps going. So a big thank you to everyone who has actually ended up subscribing from all over the world. We've had a few different countries and at least 27 people within our first week. So I'm pretty pleased with that. So a big thank you to all of those people.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll stay with us. Here's hoping. So for our episode this week, we've got the news. We'll then be going into our creature feature, which Aaron has got a strange dinosaur with us. We've then got the word of the week, where we're going to be bringing you a bizarre scientific term that you may have never heard of before that's got a really interesting explanation. And believe it or not, we've actually got some mail from some of the listeners. So we're going to be answering some questions at the end of the show. So we will start off with... Are you okay there, Aaron?
Yeah.
That's okay. Just making sure.
Tickle in my throat.
Nice and professional, everybody. Anyway, we will start off with the news. Welcome to the news. So today we've got Drew giving us his article about, rewilding of Britain. So we'll start off with you, Drew, before I go into to my article, which is also a little bit along the same theme, but for a slightly different reason. So do you want to explain to us rewilding with bison?
Absolutely. So, the article that I've been looking into this week is one on The Independent, and it's called We Must Get Behind Radical Rewilding Initiatives, such as Reintroducing Bison to Britain. So to start off with the bare basics, I think, what is a bison? Well, it's a big old cow.
Isn't it?
It's a big old cow.
Well, I thought the difference between a bison and a basin is you can wash your hands in one and not the other.
Didn't.
Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't want to entertain that with anything at all, so I'll stay silent.
I can only apologise to everyone.
Oh, Jesus. Well, anyway, bison. So it's the heaviest terrestrial animal in Europe. They are similar to the American bison, which is sometimes incorrectly called a buffalo. But European bison are taller. They've got slightly longer legs. And they browse more than American bisons do, which graze more. So they're more sort of focused in forested areas, whereas American bison live out in the big old plains. So historically, bison were native to most of Europe, and it may have inhabited some of northern Asia as well. So their range decreased as human populations expanded and cut down forests. By the 20th century, they were declared extinct in the wild. But through captive breeding programs, they have been reintroduced in the wild. Across quite a lot of Europe, and they're now numbering several thousand, but they're still absent from most of their historic range. Now, the European bison wasn't, or possibly, we're not 100% sure, but it probably wasn't native to the UK. But fossil records of the steppe bison have been discovered here, and the European very, very closely related. It's theoretically a hybrid also of the steppe bison and the aurochs. And it basically occupies the same niche. So the steppe bison is extinct now due to the European bison quite possibly replacing it, although there was a degree of crossover between the two. So the Kent Wildlife Trust and the Wildwood Trust in Kent as well will be heralding the introduction of the European bison to the UK in West Blean in Kent in a 200-hectare enclosure to start with. And why do they want to do this? Well, because bison are ecosystem engineers, a bit like beavers, and I'm sure we'll cover those at some point on another episode.
I think the Wildwood Trust have also done rewilding with beavers as well down in Kent.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because there's some in the River Otter in South Devon, isn't there? But
there are, and they're up in Scotland
done
as well.
Unofficially.
Yes, but it's all been sort of made official since then, though. But the bison, like I said, are like beavers in the sense that they're ecosystem engineers. So they basically create an ecosystem by just their presence within it and their habits within it. So they're obviously very, very muscular, and I quote from the article, they thrash about with gay abandon. So they turn up the turf and they diversify the forest floor.
But they do it in a happy way.
Sorry, say again?
They're doing it in a happy way, though.
They're doing it in a really they're thrilled. They're thrilled about their thrashing. And how does this help? So what it does is it promotes a complex root system, which in turn promotes mycorrhizal fungi, which I think I'm pronouncing correctly.
Yeah.
I did have to do one of those little pronunciation things on YouTube.
No, that's definitely how you pronounce that. That's really important for the health of a forest floor, that, and even the garden at home. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, so it's really So a good fungi ratio in the forest floor and any sort of soil or compost is really, really helpful. Basically means that all the plants will be nice and healthy. But that fungi also acts like a messaging system for the trees as well. So they can literally talk to one another. If one's under attack by squirrels or worms or who knows, dwarves, then they can tell the other trees, "I'm under attack. Please, sort yourself out. Get ready. Be prepared. Maybe move, run away. Whatever it is you want to do to
electric signal that trees send out, isn't it? Yeah, they do it when there's forest fires as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that electronic scream is what I heard it disturbingly described as once.
The worst thing is the other trees just stand there and watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, they are. I think they're quite sadistic trees. They
do just stand and watch,
don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, mycorrhizal fungi is a carbon guzzler as well. And studies have shown that a good ratio of fungi in the compost and in the soil can sequester up to 20 tons of carbon per hectare per year. So not only do they promote a healthy forest through turning it over, the bison that is, the shedding also from their coats also nourishes the soil as well. So it's a fantastic natural solution to our nature depleted country. The UK is is probably the most nature depleted country in Europe. We certainly have less forest in the UK than any other country in Europe. But you may or may not know that we have more ancient forest than any other country in Europe. In fact, actually, we have more ancient forest than all other countries in Europe combined.
It's just in one area, like just lumped all in one garden, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really need to protect it, and these bison will certainly help if they did become widespread and they were allowed pretty much to help manage it. But yeah, human management alone isn't often enough to create the kinds of habitats that species need.
Absolutely not.
So that's the bison article.
Oh well, we can certainly hope that that goes ahead. I get the feeling there might be a few people who'd be a little bit sort of against the idea, but when it comes to rewilding stuff, there almost certainly always is people against it.
Yeah.
Did you come across any of that, Drew?
Yeah, I can read out a certain comment to you if you like, which is on this article on The Independent.
Yeah.
So it was the comment said, "Won't the climate change bunch be against this? Reintroducing large ruminants is going to lead to more methane in the atmosphere." So I will just point out that they only want to start with. They only want to introduce, I think it's 4 bison to begin with. So one male, 3 females. So I don't think that's going to have a significant impact.
I mean, that's a very large number of bison there compared to all the cattle.
That's also someone who's trying to, pull threads and just to cause an argument. I think because of the whole, at the moment we've got this kind of. There's a view that I'm trying to be politically correct. There's a view that the way we manage our cattle farming is detrimental to the environment via climate change.
Mm.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Well, let's hope we end up seeing bison in the wild and hopefully all over the country. I certainly wouldn't mind seeing them.
I would like to.
We definitely will.
This.
we definitely will, because this is happening, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
Or at least as far as the organisations getting involved are aware. So the Kent Wildlife Trust and the Wildwood Trust. So the bison should arrive, or should be put basically in the wild, and I do the wild with air quotes because they're in a large enclosure. It should be in 2022. So it should be next year.
I've just a couple questions. So I know the groups involved, but do you know where the individuals are coming from, where they're being sourced from?
No,
no, that's all right. That's all right.
I can look it up though.
The only reason I ask it is a good thing to jump in on, since the three of us have at varying stages been related to zoos. The Wisent. That was another question. This is the Wisent, yeah.
Yes, I did mean to. I did mean to say that. So it's it's also called a Wisent, but yeah, it's the same thing, just another name.
This species has actually been struggling in Europe for a long time. I can't remember the exact numbers. I think they went down to like 400 or something at one point. Now they're up in the thousands.
I think they went extinct completely from the wild.
Oh, really?
Almost.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And now they're in several thousand. But they're mainly sort of located in Poland. I think most of them are in Poland, but a few other countries have some scattered about.
Well, they were one of the first wild species for which captive breeding used the kind of the racehorse model for breeding thoroughbreds and purebreds for horse racing and stuff, and having a stud book and all that. Mm-hmm. These guys were one of the first wild species to have that.
They're certainly one of those very first big success stories when it comes to a large mammal like that. Them and the
scimitar horned oryx
is another big success story.
It leads me on to my last question about this article, Drew, and then I'll stop bugging you, I promise.
Yep.
But a few zoos actually, especially in UK, I believe Highland Wildlife Park may have been involved, but my memory is kind of on it. But there was a few released into Spain a couple of years ago, and I believe a lot of them got poached very shortly after being released. So I understand that they're going into an enclosure. I'm hoping I'm right in assuming that the enclosure is much like most breed release programs. The enclosure is temporary, and then once they're settled and like the appropriate kind of research and preparations have been carried out, they might then be allowed out, not into the wild, because there isn't one in Britain, but like out of the enclosure. If that were to happen, and even in the enclosure, actually, considering what happens to that rhino in France, is there anyone protecting them?
So they're being released into Wilder Blean, which is in Kent. So I think the plan is basically to see how they go within those 200 acres, and then maybe look at either letting those ones out further or possibly doing the same, but in different parts of the country. I'm not sure. I'm not 100%. I'm trying to find the article for it now, but there was another article that you can find that's either on the Kent Wildlife Trust or in the Wildwood Trust about this specific project.
Oh yeah. They're looking for 2 people to actually be rangers to look after them. So I would imagine it's going to be a case they're going to spend a good chunk of their day looking at bison.
Yes, basically, yeah.
What a wonderful animal to look at.
Exactly.
Those jobs are going right now as well. So
if that appeals to you, look those up.
if you live near Kent, or even if you want to travel to Kent, they're looking for 2 rangers to try and help preserve these guys and study them and protect them.
Cool.
Yeah. Right. Well, that takes us from one rewilding project that's happening because of man to another rewilding project that's happening purely because the animal wants to. And that is the bearded vulture, or the Lamagar vulture, a bird that I absolutely love and I've been very lucky to actually see in the wild. It's another one that has turned up in the UK. They've from the news article that I've got here from the Eastern Daily Press, the very short news article that I've got from it, A bearded vulture has been spotted in Norfolk, flying over someone's chicken coop, as the Twitter comment says on the news article. Why is that of interest? I mean, the UK doesn't really have any vulture species, but every now and again, lammergeier vultures have been spotted turning up in the UK. They seem to do it for no particular reason other than they just are looking for somewhere to go and have a bit of a jolly. Usually, they're quite young birds. They're last year's bird, and this one will just be a year old. And the thought is, no one really knows exactly why they come to the UK or Northern Europe, because they're mainly found in Southern Europe around the Alps, high up in the mountains, and out onto sort of the plains in Spain, where I believe it rains. And they spend their days looking for carcasses, being vultures.
Stop encouraging him.
I'm going to put as many dad jokes in there as possible. So this one has turned up over Norfolk, over someone's chicken coop. Although it's not going to be taking chickens, not unless they're leaving a pen full of dead chickens.
Yeah,
they are very much scavengers, these birds.
Yeah, so that comment within that article annoyed me. Sorry to sort of derail you there.
It's all that thought.
When someone said, "Oh my God, there's a lammergeier or a bearded vulture hovering over my chickens in the back garden," so it's quite high up in the air, up in the sky. It could be looking at anything. Why have you assumed it's your chickens? There's a lot for it to look up to. I don't know if anyone's ever hovered for a long time. You can see quite a lot.
I haven't done that too much hovering, but
yeah, they're not after your chickens.
No. If anything, they have been spotted in the UK a couple of times. So there was one last year, and there was one in 2019, and one in 2016. The records going back to lammergeiers turning up in the UK. The one in 2016 actually made it as far over from Europe, right the way over to Devon, which is quite a decent trek. And so essentially, they think these birds just go for a bit of a gap year, effectively, when they've left the nest. They're looking for somewhere to go. They always seem to go north, according to the research that I've looked into. They seem to fly around, look for somewhere, find somewhere to have a bit of food, spend a couple of weeks or sometimes even months in that area, and then disappear back down to southern Europe.
I was going to say, this is probably because there's lots of rabbits here that die and no predators to eat them. So
yeah.
Just pick up a dead rabbit whenever they want.
The thought is this is a bird that has almost zero impact on our native species, apart from cleaning up, which would be really, really good. So if we did end up with bearded vultures ever actually breeding in the UK and living here, it wouldn't actually create too much of an impact. The only other birds that in the UK that are basically our version of a vulture are things like red kites, which thankfully their numbers are on the increase. And if you've ever been to Gigrin Farm in Wales, where they feed them, or some of the other places where they are incredibly common, they are, well, basically scavengers. They don't hunt things as such. They tend to just pick up carcasses and feed off them, pretty much like lammergeier vultures do.
Yeah.
But they are an amazing bird to see in the wild. I spent some time in the Pyrenees looking for them. And, well, they were doing exactly what you were saying, Drew. They were hovering.
Yeah.
Although I wasn't near any chicken coops at the time.
No.
So
they are certainly just not interested, yeah.
Not really, no. Yeah. But they are amazing in that they eat bones as well. And they will eat solid pieces of bone, and their stomach acid can actually digest the goodness out of it and be able to get through it. So they are pretty tough birds with a really, really bizarre feeding strategy. But if there's a gap, they'll basically, fill in that gap. But unfortunately, the UK, like you were saying, with our destruction of our habitats, we're also one of the top countries for persecuting raptors in all of Europe.
We love it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, unfortunately, people in Britain are very, very good at poisoning birds of prey. And I say raptors as in birds of prey, not as in dinosaurs. But there are many cases every year where birds of prey are poisoned, usually by farmers, because they think they are going to do things like take chickens, or even as bizarre as taking sheep. These are animals that just don't do that. So here's hoping that vulture stays around, has a good time, disappears back to wherever it's, what part of Southern Europe it's come from, and we see more in the future. So
absolutely,
yeah, definitely,
absolutely. So
but if you're in Norfolk, try and get out. Well, I'd say try and get out and see this thing. However,
no, don't
get out and see this thing because of current COVID restrictions in the UK. So, and if it's flying over your chicken coop at home, have a good look and take some photos. Send them in to us.
Yes, and even if lockdown is over, even when we finish lockdown, just stop traveling, stop going, just stop, please.
Just stop.
Just stop.
Keep yourself safe and keep those safe around you.
Absolutely.
Anyway, regardless of COVID restrictions, let's move on. Okay, and we're back for our second creature feature ever. And this week, it's a bizarre little dinosaur that Aaron is going to tell us about. So take it away.
Okay, so this week, in choosing the creature feature, I wanted to go for what I keep saying is my favourite dinosaur, but I can't decide what my favourite dinosaur is. But its name is Ambopteryx longibrachium. Which means the Ambopteryx part means both wings, and the longibrachium part means long upper arms. Now, this is a really cool looking little dinosaur. We describe it, or rather I describe it, as a furry or feathery little wyvern-sized, sparrow-sized wyvern. Wyvern being a type of dragon, for those of you that don't know. But essentially, what it looks like is it has a blunt head, so it doesn't have a long snout. Don't think of kind of your raptor type animals. A little bit of a shorter snout. As I said, or as I suggested, it's covered in feathers, but they're very fine fur-like feathers. Proto feathers, yeah, thank you. It's got an elongated third finger, which originally they believed that's actually quite characteristic of the group that this animal belongs to, which I'll try and pronounce for you in a minute. But they originally believed...
I can do that one for you if you wish, Aaron. I do actually... That one I do know. I couldn't pronounce its name beforehand, but I can pronounce the group that it belongs to. But anyway...
I have a question about it in a minute, which you might be able to answer. So the third finger was originally believed to be used similar to that of eyes, so for gripping and for also kind of fishing into, get bugs out of things. However, it's since been understood as an anchor point for the wing membranes to attach to, and that's kind of the most important thing about these guys is their wings, how unique they are. But before we get onto that, just a quick description. Their tail is a bit different as well. So they have a short pigger-style tail, which means it's ended in a fused set of vertebrae, and this is what anchors the tail feathers in living avian dinosaurs, otherwise known as birds. So you can kind of imagine that it's a short tail, and it's probably got either some sort of array or display of tail feathers similar to a bird. I'm thinking it's from the illustrations I've seen, it seems to be popular to depict them with having a tail somewhat reminiscent of a red kite or a bird of paradise, where the feathers on the outside are kind of longer than the ones on the inner part of the tail. But yeah,
sort of strap-like, really, aren't they?
Yeah. Just to circle back to it, is the wings, because the wings are unique, or not unique, but they're unique to this family, because we've kind of always understood dinosaurs to kind of transition through evolution into avian dinosaurs, the birds, kind of by some sort of gradual development of the wings that we would recognize today, not these type of wings, which we know pterosaurs had something similar, but now, because of this discovery, like I say, this 3-4 now, but this discovery kind of blew the whole conversation open. There may have been 4 attempts by the dinosaurs to evolve flight, And this one is by far the coolest, in my opinion, because these guys evolved a bat-like membrane that was connected to their digits and to the flanks of their body. So what you're imagining essentially is a small bird-sized drogon or smaug, essentially.
Not breathing fire.
I was about to say you wouldn't get burnt by it, but yeah, awesome thing to imagine. And if you do get the chance, Google Ambopteryx longibrachium, have a look at it. The paleo art for this animal is just incredible. I love it. So yeah, that's essentially what they look like. They were recovered in 2017 from the. Like I said, I'm probably going to butcher names in this one. So they were recovered in 2017 from the equivalent kind of geo area of, here we go, Haifangao Formation near...
Chinese pronunciation there.
Yeah, so China, yeah.
We can only apologise to any Chinese listeners.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, because I'm not going to be doing your language any credit here. So this formation is found near Wubeiding village in the Liaoning province. Liaoning, is it?
Yeah,
Liaoning. Thank you. Well, that's where they're found. And this particular fossil is so important because it wasn't just a piece or several pieces, which is what they found of close relatives like Yiki and of this animal as well, I believe. Instead, this time they found an articulated, nearly complete skeleton with the soft tissue displayed quite clearly on both the slab and the counter slab. So that's the two sides of the fossil when you break them open. That's right, isn't it, Gareth?
Yeah. One's basically the negative.
Thank you. Yeah.
The positive. So you get sort of a reversed image sometimes of the same
thing.
So
this fossil is important for possibly four reasons here. Not only is it an articulated, nearly complete skeleton showing you what this animal would have looked like, its basic form. That's important enough because, like I say, only fragments have been found. But also soft tissue that I mentioned, that included these feathers that I spoke about, and most importantly, the bat wing. A brown wing membrane was found in this. And they've never been certain what these animals have eaten. There's always been like some speculation, but now they can say with somewhat certainty that these guys were omnivores. Because not only does the fossil show evidence of gastroliths, which are basically stones, I would say is the best way of describing them, stones that help to grind up plant matter, but also they found large fragments of bone, suggesting that they hunted too. Previous to this, the diets of this group were unknown. I am going to try and pronounce the group name so you guys at home can look them up. Prepare for it to be butchered. Scansoriopterygid.
Scansoriopterygid is very much correct, Derek.
You've answered the question I had about this name because I was thinking, because the P and the T are so close together, I was wondering the same thing that we were wondering about Ambopteryx, whether the P would be pronounced or not.
I think it's the same as with anything that's got optery in, because their name means climbing wing. Anything that's got opt or opteryx is wings. So
I
think it's as to whether you pronounce it, but I'm no paleontologist.
These guys lived about 160 million years ago, which actually further interests me because this fossil predates the fossils that show dinosaurs developing feathered wings. So this method of flying was actually attempted, evolutionary speaking, before the birds. So you could potentially look at them as a failed experiment.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Like all the different people who tried different types of planes.
They may not be happy with that, but I mean...
No, they won't be happy with it. It's not a very nice way to talk about one of my favourite dinosaurs, is it?
If any of the dinosaurs want to come and take it up with me, I'm more than happy.
Oh, for sure. If they want to explain their sort of side of things, then
yes.
Please email in.
Always up for talking it out. With
Speaking of if they wanted to contact us, I do have a direct quote from Ambopteryx longibrachium, and he says, "My armor is like tenfold shields, my teeth are swords, my claws are spears, the thunderbolt, my wings are hurricane, and my breath is death."
I think you might have got that confused in the pocket there.
Isn't that from The Hobbit?
It is. It's Smaug. Smaug the Magnificent, chiefest calamity of our time.
Yeah. How big were these dinosaurs? Sorry.
So, how big they were? I do you know what? I actually couldn't find a exact thing. I've been referring to them as sparrow-sized wyverns because they've literally the information literally says that they are small bird-sized. And when I think of a small bird, I think of sparrow, robin, that kind of size. But
they're a tiny bit
bigger.
I'm looking at the first comparison here. I would say sort of maybe magpie.
Yeah.
That's a small bird, isn't it? I suppose the ones I'm thinking of are tiny birds. The
ones they do actually go down a little bit smaller in that. Ambopteryx, which is the only one of the group that I can actually pronounce their name completely off, is a little bit smaller, but not by much.
That's the one I've not heard of because I know of Yichi, and obviously I know of Ambopteryx. I find Ambopteryx. I'm going to look into the one that you mentioned. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but I find Ambopteryx is the more interesting looking out of the two that I know. Here's an interesting thing as well. I wrongly assumed from when I first found out about this animal till I did a little bit more research into it for this podcast, I wrongly assumed that these guys were gliders and that they were too clumsy to fly. But apparently this debate has not settled at all, and researchers are still working out and doing the math of whether these mini dragons could fly. But they do know for sure that they could at least glide from tree to tree like a sugar glider. But they have a feeling that these guys actually could fly. They're now searching for more evidence of the membranes in fossilized specimens, and they're using cutting edge laser technology to reveal the soft tissue in the rock. They spared no expense.
Oh, there, you got it in.
I got it in.
Well, there you go. Yeah, you got the Jurassic Park reference in there.
So yeah, it's a really important fossil because, like I say, the fur and feathers, the wind membrane, and the fact that we now know what they ate.
Yeah. So do these guys predate? Because it's late Jurassic, isn't it? So does it predate? Because you're saying it predates a lot of feathered sort of non-avian.
Not necessarily. I don't think it predates like feathers. I think it predates the transition of arms into more wing-like structures.
Okay, so does it predate Archaeopteryx? Do you know?
Gareth, you're probably the better one for that. This guy lived around 160 million years ago.
If I remember correctly, and I would say that these guys are pre-Archaeopteryx by about 20 million years, but that's only because Archaeopteryx
just missed each other.
Yeah, well, that and one lived in Germany and one lived in China.
Well,
and at that point they still were fairly distant places apart from each other.
A dogfight we'll never see.
Unfortunately, no. It would be a very small
dogfight, by the way, not actual dogfighting. Just to keep this, just to be absolutely clear.
But Archaeopteryx, I've just double checked.
That's another fantastic animal.
I double checked it as well, and you were pretty much spot on. I think
150 million years. So yeah, they were slightly different from each other time period wise, but there were certainly dinosaurs that looked very similar to Archaeopteryx living in the same parts of China a little bit later on. So you've got things like Microraptor and Sinosauropteryx and some of those various other species that would have probably outcompeted these guys in things. So it's one of those evolutionary experiments where you end up with animals evolving to do different things in different ways.
I think the importance of this fossil is like obviously we draw a live comparison to Archaeopteryx because it's the one you think of when it comes to dinosaurs and birds. But I think it can't be understated how important both the Archaeopteryx, the typical Archaeopteryx fossil that we think of when we imagine it, and this fossil, how important these two fossils have been to just kind of exploding the discussion about flight and birds and the place of both in the realm of the dinosaurs.
They are stunning, and they are priceless fossils as well. In just basically how they look. To me, most of those fossils are more beautiful than the Mona Lisa.
I can't.
Wow.
But then again, I'm a dinosaur.
There we go. That is a statement to end on, I think.
So we'll go from flying dinosaur bats into our next topic, which instead of us doing our pop culture corner this week, we have got a word of the week. So we'll go into our word of the week segment. And welcome along to our first word of the week. This week's word of the week is thigmotaxis, or thigmotactic. Essentially, the definition for that is an organism's response to the stimulus of contact or touch. This response can either be positive or it can be negative. And essentially, it's the way that animals have responded to those touches that has actually driven them down different evolutionary lines. One of the best examples of an animal that is thigmotactically positive and likes to be touched, likes to cram itself into one of the smallest spaces it can possibly find, is things like cockroaches. Now, most people don't like cockroaches. I absolutely love them. But if you went looking for cockroaches in the wild, you would usually find them crammed underneath a bark piece on the side of a tree or underneath a log in a large group, all crammed together. They actually feel nice and safe, nice and calm when they're in physical contact with each other or actually pressed up against something tight underneath a log. And the same would be true if you had cockroaches in your house. They would find a dark space to hide underneath. And essentially, that stimulus of being up close to everyone allows them to stay safe and allows them to not get eaten. Now, one of the other sort of ways that thigmotactic stimulus can also work is for plants as well. And there's a fantastic plant called a touch-me-not. If you've ever seen one of these, have you guys ever seen a touch-me-not plant?
I've not.
No, I've not.
So essentially what they do is sort of the reverse of a Venus flytrap, which will close to grab a hold of something when there's food around. So that's another thigmotactic response. It's basically clamping down because it feels that outside influence of a fly or something landing on it, and that means it gets its food. But the touch-me-not likes to make sure that it doesn't get eaten by insects. No plant wants to get eaten by insects, but it's in that rare group of plants that's actually figured out a way of getting any insect that lands on it to fall off. The first thing it will do if it gets just a slight touch is the leaves will curl in a little bit. Now, if that touch then continues, and it's not, say, just a drop of rain that's just run off, it will then drop its stem down a little bit further. It essentially folds itself down to such a point that any insect that's landed on there will fall off because it's lost any sort of place to hang on to. If you keep on doing it too much, just like with a Venus flytrap, it can kill the plant. But they are one of those absolutely bizarre little plants that make sure that they don't, get predated on by using this really, really fantastic method of making sure that anything that lands on them falls off.
So it will introvert itself to death.
If you keep touching it, if you were to go out to where these plants live in South Africa and start touching these plants just a bit too much, they will eventually die because it sort of pulls too much energy out of the plant to do it. It is a response to making sure that it doesn't get eaten by things like locusts, which will fall off when the plant curls in on itself. But it's not designed to sort of get rid of humans, unfortunately.
No. I know I was simplifying that a little bit much, but so yes, basically.
Yeah. I didn't think you were going to go down the route of this plant being touched to death. I was imagining this plant packing his bags and saying, "Right, I'm off, lads. Packing my bags and going to another field, mate."
They haven't quite worked out how to move yet. It's the very basics of movement for a plant, which is still pretty amazing compared to
yeah, absolutely.
Plants just sit there and do nothing. But it's that response to stimulus, outside touch from something else, that makes them do things. All animals, to an extent, are thigmotactically positive and have thigmotactically negative bits to them. So essentially, we don't want to touch things that are going to hurt us, but we do want to touch things that are positive. So it's just the way of getting that across.
We like a hug, but we don't want to be poked in the eye.
Pretty much. So,
I was wondering where you're going with that.
Some other really good examples are things like earwigs. They actually have really amazing parental care, and the babies actually develop a lot better and a lot safer when they're kept with their mother. So if you ever lift up a stone, and the same you can find here in the UK, or a log, and you see an earwig, a lot of the babies will be basically very close to each other, and unlike what their name suggests, they don't live in people's ears. So that's a touch response that they're not going to want, is to climb inside of a human ear. Not unless
can we 100% confirm that? Can we have like a little sound clip? 100% confirmed does not crawl into ears.
If you want to go and bury yourself in the leaf litter in the forest, there's a chance you may end up with one in there. But I think that probably says more about you and in your habits in the forest than it does about you.
Well, it would do if I did do that, yes. Well, you're assuming that I do.
Is that common in the insect world for them to be thigmotactic, or take it one step further to have a strong parental instinct like earwigs?
Some species of insect are really, really heavily parental, because it's a really good response to make sure that your animal, the next generation stays safe. Some don't really care as much. Some species will carry around their eggs or the egg sac. Wolf spiders are another good example. Not an insect, but an invertebrate. They'll carry that egg sac around. They'll keep it nice and clean, and they'll keep it around until the babies hatch out. And to an even greater extent, some animals will make sure that their eggs are so protected that they end up dying at the end of it. Think octopuses, for instance, will basically starve
I was thinking about that as well,
to make sure that their eggs are oxygenated and protected from outside sources. So the moment they hatch, the mother just carks it there and then. So they don't tend to live past about a year or two, which is really kind of sad.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
There's a heartbreaking part of Blue Planet, I believe, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, most of Blue Planet, there's heartbreaking moments in it. Depends on how you look at it, I suppose. But yes, there is in itself our first word of the week: thigmotactic or thigmotaxis. So we'll move on from that, from our word of the week, and we're going to dive for the first time ever into our mailbag, because believe it or not, we've actually got some mail this time. So let's go to our mailbag. Okay, we're now going to dive into our mailbag, because believe it or not, we actually have some questions in the mailbag this week. We have 3 specifically. Not a giant amount, I know, but still, it's 3 good questions.
Is 3 deep enough to dive into, or do you just step in cautiously?
You can try. Well, I mean, you can try diving in. You might end up hurting yourself, but I mean, I sort of picture eventually a sort of Scrooge McDuck style situation where we've got a gigantic vault of letters.
Wonderful.
Where people can dive into to pick the letter. But for the moment, we'll start off with 3 just slightly covering the floor. It was a better joke than that.
It sounds good to me.
Okay, well, we'll move on to Drew. Do you want to kick things off with your question that you've been sent in this week?
Yes, absolutely. So of all the millions of questions that we got this week, we've selected just a couple out. I've had to shift through so many emails. Some of them are questions. Some of them Gareth has logged on to different things, but we won't go down that. So no, we've got a couple of questions here from all from the same person, and we're going to cover two of them. So these questions are from Jess, who is my partner. That might be a reason why we got these questions.
It was nice that she emailed in and humoured us.
Sure, absolutely.
At least she pretends to listen.
Well, yes.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah. So she's titled this "Questions for Lonely Boys," and she said, "Here are some questions to stop you being lonely boys when you next check your very sexist mailbox. In future, please refer it to as either gender neutral or simply inbox."
We're not setting out to try and pick fights with people, but I think she might be trying to pick a fight.
Yeah, she always is. Anyway, so the question was, let me just grab them here, is what is your opinion of rewilding in the UK, and what reintroduced species are you most excited for?
So it fits in quite nicely with this week's theme. It's almost like she'd read your article that you were about to read out.
It's almost as if she did, yeah.
Well, take it away then, Drew.
Oh, am I going first with this one, am I? I asked the question.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. My opinion of rewilding is I found a really good quote, actually, from someone. And whilst, it's not my quote, I would just want to hijack it for my answer. Because I enjoyed it, and I feel I sort of feel the same way. So the quote is: "Wilding is rewilding is when nature is given the tools and space it needs to recover itself, and has the potential to increase abundance of biodiversity to levels beyond what human management can achieve alone." And I think that pretty much sums up my opinion of it. It's sometimes quite a controversial tool, but it is a tool that is definitely something that we can use to make great benefit to our native species, whether it be in the UK or whether we're rewilding across the world. Obviously, the conditions have to be correct in order to rewild something to somewhere. You have to make sure that it can flourish, that it isn't going to affect local people in a negative way, because then you're just fighting two battles there, which you are just essentially going to lose. It's I think it's a very effective tool, and it's one that has got a lot of sort of notice now as well. I think people are looking into doing this more and more, and all the best to all of those people who are going into those projects. The animal I think I would be most excited to reintroduce back into the UK is one I think that's probably already being reintroduced, which is beavers, which we mentioned earlier as well. I think they're the one I'm more excited for than most others, because as we've mentioned before, they are sort of ecosystem engineers, and they create an environment by themselves, creating huge areas of wetland that encourage all sorts of other animals to live and breed in those areas. So with them, other things move in as well. So yeah, those are my guys, I think.
Yeah, cool. Aaron, would you like to give us your thought on which species you'd want to see coming back to the UK?
Yeah, it's actually a more difficult question than I thought it would be, actually. I'm all for reintroduction, obviously done appropriately. If I may just toe the line of politics a little bit here, I would say that it's a crime, I think, that our nation allows every year thousands of invasive, non-native species to be released purely for the purposes of enjoying shooting them. And not all of them get shot. So, as I say, they're invasive, so they keep breeding. We see these pheasants and partridge around a lot. And yet it is so difficult and so bound in bureaucratic red tape to get anything reintroduced. Anything that was native here reintroduced. The fact that someone got fed up, someone in South Devon, I think it was, got fed up with how long it was taking to get beavers reintroduced, so took it upon himself to do it unofficially. The fact that they have so many problems. Is it Airedale? Airedale, the land in Airedale in Scotland,
yes,
where they've been trying to reintroduce predators and ungulate species. The fact that only now with the Wyvern in Kent, we're talking 4 individuals, but thousands of pheasants can be reintroduced, and I just think the impact on the ecosystem is traumatic. But yeah, well, there it is. Yeah. I can't really answer what species I'm most excited for, because I would love to be super excited about the wyvern because they're one of my favourite animals, and I would love to see them in the UK. I know they're not the native species. I think we were talking about the steppe bison.
Yes, but they're pretty much the sort of equivalent.
But
they do the same job.
They'll do the same, yeah.
Well, yeah, and they're all the bison around today, Europe or America, they're all descended from the steppe bison, if I remember right. So
you are going quite a decent way though for that one.
Yeah, but they fill the same ecological niche. My issue with it is that we've already got overbrowsing and overgrazing on all our wildlands from our native hoofstock stock like red deer and the invasive stuff. We are not very good at controlling our land. The slash and burn that goes on isn't. I think I've been reading recently. It's not the best form of land management. We're rewilding plant-wise. We're rewilding trees that aren't native in a lot of cases. So yeah, I'd like to say I'm most excited about the wyvern, but the ungulate's already causing a problem. So then, obviously, what can I be excited about? And I think it would be wolves, but then there's so many problems with wolves because people just don't like them and don't want them here. In Britain, we have a very double standard when it comes to reintroducing predators. Everyone else has to live with tigers and lions, but we can't live with a badger and a fox. So there's that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm actually going to be a little bit dull, and I'm going to side with Drew and say the thing that excites me most, rewilding-wise, in Britain right now is beavers, because they're the ones who can make an ecological difference right now. They're different, and just beavers, just on they're in themselves, without talking about reintroduction, they are fantastic animals. I love them. They're so interesting. And I can't wait. When this lockdown's over, first thing I'd like to do is go down and see them.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit of...
Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah. No, not at all. Sorry. Yeah, if I just interject very quickly, because you were talking about pheasants and release of game birds. In the previous podcast, I chucked out a fact, and I did word it incorrectly, and I just wanted to quickly correct myself on that. So I think I said in the last one that half of the wild bird population that we have in the UK is released game birds. That's not actually true. It's half of the wild bird biomass in the UK. So it's not half the population. It's half basically the total biomass of all of those birds. Yeah, the total weight of birds. So it's still quite significant. But
it's just one bird, and he's really heavy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just thought I'd throw that out because this is scientific, and we want to be correct. And I wasn't. I didn't interpret that correctly.
Fair enough.
What about you, Gareth?
Well, I mean, I do agree very much that we need to try and rewild as much as possible, but unfortunately, we can't do that until we sort of look at our farming practices.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at upland areas, they don't look anything like they used to look before people started grazing sheep and cows and all sorts of things on them. And all those forests that should be there just aren't there. So places like Dartmoor and Exmoor, they just don't have those forests or anything on them anywhere near as much as they should. If you go looking on them, those forests are there, but they're in the areas where those animals just can't be bothered to get to, or where people couldn't be bothered to go and put a fence. So in small little valleys and sharp cliffed areas where just there's nothing to get to. But the animals that I'd like to, or the animal that I'd most like to see, I've got two answers for this: a serious one and a stupid one. Both of which are animals that have lived in the UK.
Mammoth.
No. However, saying that,
Baryonyx.
One of them was probably more close to seeing a mammoth roaming around than anything else.
Oh,
my silly animal would be walruses. Believe it or not, we did used to have walruses in the UK, but you're looking quite a bit ago at the last ice age, when the climate was considerably different. And believe it or not, there was someone who actually wanted to try and introduce walruses into the Dee estuary off the coast of Wales.
Fantastic idea.
And West England, which would just be an insane proposition because, well, the habitat's not there for them. It's quite a busy shipping area. And I can't imagine your average dog walker walking along the edge of the River Dee and that would want to come across an animal that has the ability to kill a polar bear. I think that could cause some issues, but they are such a fantastic animal, and I would love to see one just swimming past me one day. But the more sensible animal, and one that I think is definitely something that could happen, based on also reading up on the rewilding stuff that you showed us earlier, Drew, is in fact European tree frogs.
Yeah.
An animal that seems to have disappeared because we've drained a lot of the wetland areas where they were thought to have bred. They seem to have just disappeared entirely, and we've not really noticed when they disappeared. So we don't even have an exact date as to when they went extinct in the UK.
That's sad.
But one that we could certainly see reintroduced, and probably one that could be done fairly easily.
Yes.
Because those wetland areas now are a lot better protected. A lot of them aren't being drained anymore. And in fact, new areas are being created. So it's one that might actually happen fairly recently, or fairly soon if we're lucky.
I think actually it has already.
It's already
on a
started,
very small scale, and not sort of like with any sort of drive to do it. I think it's just been just a few have been sort of. I don't think it's necessarily escape pets. I think people have intended to rewild them, but it's not been like a nationwide sort of let's do this. I guess sort of a bit like the beavers down in on the
someone sneaking around with a box of frogs.
I might be wrong, but I think it might be Dorset where there are some. Basically, some guy has got a few on his land, and he would like to increase that number. But yeah, he was basically saying on it. I don't know what people would throw their arms up about. It's just a frog. It's just a little frog. They were apparently really noisy.
People really don't like.
They're apparently really noisy, which I can guess that much. And that might be why they were probably ended up being extinct from this island, because Neolithic settlers could find them pretty easily. They just kept shouting.
I'm over here.
I'm on this tree.
Well, that's probably a downside to them being quite so noisy.
No, they would be cool. They would be very cool to have back.
Yeah. Have you guys seen smooth snakes? Because they were reintroduced into parts of the UK.
Yeah, there are some areas. There are some areas in the UK.
Down in Dorset as well.
Yeah. We can't say exactly where they are, just in case anyone's wondering. But a select few people do know where.
Yeah.
But they don't tend to make as much noise as a tree frog.
No. I just wondered if you guys had seen them.
Yeah. Well,
I've only ever seen one once for a very brief second, but I feel very lucky to have seen it because it's essentially a British version of a panda. Although I'd say a panda would not be as rare as a smooth snake is.
Yeah.
So let's go on from our first letter to our second letter, Aaron, and this has actually come from someone who isn't Jess.
Yeah. So this comes to us from a good friend called Kerry, and she asks. So she's been watching with her little boy. She's been watching a thing on Netflix called. By the way, there are other streaming services available.
Right, we're not the BBC.
Right, yeah. This is not sponsored.
Okay.
Yeah. If Netflix want to pick us up, that's fine.
I'm just covering our bases. This program's called Dinosaur Train. Now, in the intro, she says that they find a T-Rex in a pteranodon's nest, and it got her thinking, was it a hint at real facts, and that perhaps T-Rexes were a bit like cuckoos and laid their eggs in other dinosaurs' nests and then jogged on for whatever reason, like lack of parental instinct. But she can't find anything on Google, so she wants to know what our thoughts are.
Fair enough.
And what are your thoughts, Aaron?
Well,
yeah, you can start us off.
Well, I've actually found some pretty interesting stuff. It is quite difficult to find a lot of like kind of specific info on certain dinosaurs, and this is one of them actually. Funnily enough, because Tyrannosaurus Rex is one of the popular ones. But I'd say the parental instinct of Tyrannosaurus Rex is academic.
Very academic.
Well done.
Yeah.
So I found that kind of like crocodilians that we see today, Tyrannosaurids had sensitive areas of their face with perforated nerve openings along their snouts, making them quite sensitive. In fact, what I was reading earlier, if I remember right, it said something about them being more sensitive to touch than human fingertips, which is quite impressive. It theorizes this kind of, I think this kind of leans on the hypothesis that the area around the mouth and snout wouldn't have been feathered on the Tyrannosaurs. But Gareth, you can jump in on that if you want, because I know both me and you think that it's quite likely that Tyrannosaurs had feathers.
Well, from the the most up-to-date evidence, they've never found skin impressions of a Tyrannosaurus, but other members of the family have feathers. However, the latest sort of thought on the situation is that a T-Rex wouldn't have had feathers. Now, this changes from day to day depending on which paleontologist you speak to as well. But yeah, it wouldn't have had feathers on its head, and probably not even onto its neck. But the babies would have also almost certainly been covered in essentially a fluff, like baby birds do, to keep them warm. When they're adults, they probably didn't need it anywhere near as much. And certainly, if you had feathers or anything on your face, if you've ever seen a vulture, you'll see that they don't have very many feathers on their head. They have quite bare skin, and it means that if they get blood or guts on them, which a T-Rex is going to get quite a lot of blood or guts on it, it's going to be a lot easier to wash off skin than it is to wash off feathers.
So they basically found these perforated. How was it put? It was perforated nerve openings. They basically found these. They found these in a Tyrannosaurid. It wasn't in T-Rex that they first noticed. It was in, I think it was a relative of the Spletosaurus, which is a Tyrannosaurid that actually went extinct before the T-Rex dispersed. Now, I'm looking at not right now, but I've got on my screen, I've got a abstract from a paper about the Spletosaurus, and another page that has about the T-Rexes. Now, they theorize that these nerve openings made, like I said, they make the snouts very sensitive, and that this sensitivity may have been used for courtship rituals in which they may have rubbed snouts, which is quite cute for such a big killing machine. Now, if you think about the fact that not many young or juvenile T-Rex are present in the fossil record,
there's certainly no hatchlings, and there's never been
there could be a good reason for that. There could be many good reasons for it, but one of the theories put forward is that most young T-Rexes lived long enough to reach adulthood, which would have meant that they would have needed parental protection to do that. And so if you take what I said about the courtship and what I'm saying about the juveniles in the fossil record, and this assumption, to be fair, that we guess that they just most of them made it to adulthood, it's quite kind of natural to think that they used this touch sensitive area of their face to communicate and to basically to communicate with their youngsters. So I would say, from what I've read, I would say that they were good parents and they did hang around.
Yeah, would that also possibly imply, again, it's an assumption as well, that maybe they didn't lay very many eggs in a clutch?
Potentially, yeah.
If
from looking at other dinosaurs,
survive till adulthood, then there's going to be lots of T-Rexes running around.
From looking at other theropod dinosaur nests, they've been able to, the sort of average clutch size appears to be somewhere around 10 to 15 for some of the smaller theropods. But there is certainly the thought that they would only, that they could, that they might only lay a few.
Sorry,
the eggs themselves, they're thought to be the largest egg of any dinosaur so far. They've never found one, like I say, but the eggs themselves would, as it's best described as a sort of a size guide, would be a large French loaf, essentially the size of a large rugby ball.
I tend to lean towards what Drew was suggesting there, that there weren't many in a clutch for the T-Rexes, and I do so by drawing comparisons to modern predators, apex predators like the T-Rex. When you think of big cats, a litter size on average is four cubs. Sorry. Wolves don't tend to have huge litters either. The apex predators of the sea. What's that, like one calf for an orca?
So. Yeah.
All the main apex predators who are at the top of the food chain, they don't have many, and that would be kind of intrinsic in keeping the balance of the ecosystem. Too many predators, not enough prey, everyone dies. But Gareth, if this is all true, if what's being pulled from evidence by these researchers is true, that would make T-Rexes positively thigmotastic.
It would.
I think they'd be very thigmotastic.
Yeah.
Well, the best thing about paleontology is you can go 1 week where we know absolutely nothing, and then next week we might have completely different answers. So we'll hopefully be coming back to this one at another point. So our third and final question comes all the way from Jess again. But this is a totally different question to the last two, this is probably the most serious question that we've had. It's a very strong question, and I would expect nothing less. So her final question was: who would win, 1 million aquatic bullet ants or one megalodon? Now, I have to assume that essentially she's either been breeding some aquatic bullet ants with at your place, Drew, or
put it past her.
Well, you'd probably know. So I'm assuming we're going on the theory that these are ants that have not only time travelled, or the megalodon has time travelled, but they're also able to live underwater. So my thought in this process is, I think, based on the fact that bullet ants get their name because a sting from a bullet ant is meant to feel like you've been shot by with a bullet, I would actually say that the megalodon would win. It would be exceedingly annoyed, and an entire 1 million bullet ants would probably really, really annoy it. But as a shark, it has got a body covered in microscopic armor, essentially. Sharks feel rough to the touch because they're covered in tiny, tiny little tough scales that will make sure that a lot of things can't get through them. Feels like coarse
sandpaper.
So and if you look at it under a microscope, it actually looks like tiny little teeth. I would think the megalodon would actually come out okay, unless it suffered an anaphylactic shock.
So it's either going to be fine, or it's that one unlucky shark, which is highly allergic to being stung by bullet ants, a creature it would never encounter in its life whatsoever. Yeah. But your thoughts?
I guess then, if you are sorry,
no, you go first.
Just making a quick point. I guess if you're out there and you're breeding megalodon for, megalodon
or aquatic bullet ants,
you presumably will need to test your shark to make sure it's not going to be allergic to these sort of ants or suffer any make it the strongest shark you can possible, because that one weakness.
Fair enough. If you're breeding time traveling sharks,
it may make it weak to these bullet ants. My initial thought, actually, I didn't really think about the armor of sharks, because of course they do. Was that how would a shark manage to repel all of these ants?
Well, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. But if it can't be touched through that armor, then maybe that's all it needs. Sorry, on you go.
I'm coming at this from a slightly different angle to you guys. I think I'm more in line of thinking that you can't breed you can't
bring
breed
logic into this, Aaron. This is not a situation for logic.
Done it, because you can't breed ants to live underwater. But what you can do is you can train anything that has a mouth and eats. So I think that they've been trained to wear little scuba gear and go for a swim. Now this presents a huge problem, because not only do they have to bite through the natural armor of a megalodon, but they've also got to take off their scuba gear in order to free their mouths to bite the megalodon. And whilst they're doing this, we're forgetting that megalodons have a huge mouth, and they could probably swallow 1 million bullet ants in one gulp. I say the megalodon wins.
That's quite true. Well, that appears to be 3 votes for the megalodon and no votes for the ants, unfortunately. So in this highly
educational
likely scenario, and very, very educational scenario, it would appear that you want to use a megalodon to defeat 1 million aquatic
so again,
bullet
for those
ants.
people out there, just make sure your megalodon is fit for purpose. Don't go cheap on your megalodons if you want them. You don't know what they're going to be facing.
One that'll just die of anaphylactic shock.
Would they have? Are they more or less likely to have an anaphylactic shock from a venom that they've never been exposed to?
I would imagine less, but I'm not sure. It's one of those ones. If you, dear listener, would like to give us your thoughts on who would win out of an aquatic bullet ant or a megalodon, please email us and we'll tally up the results, and we'll put together a list of all the attributes of the 2 combatants, and we might revisit this one in the future.
Question of the week.
I think it'd be the question of the year. It could go on throughout the ages. Scholars will be debating this one in 1,000 years' time. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's mailbag, and also brings us to the end of this week's podcast. So a big thank you two for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back with us next week as well. Not that you have anywhere else to go at the moment, so we'll definitely have you two back as well.
Okay, then.
Good. That's the only choice you get in the matter.
Yeah,
well, if you enjoyed
if
you enjoyed what you heard on this week's podcast and the other podcasts, you can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Overcast, and hopefully with more to come over the next couple of weeks. Google Casts as well should be coming online soon. If you want to get in contact with us, we are on Gmail at thenathistorykupboard@gmail.com. And if you'd like to subscribe, review, and give us a like on any of the podcast things, that helps us out immensely. And if you also want to find us on our new Facebook page, where we'll be putting up all the articles that we've referenced today in very quick succession, so you can see that and also get in contact with us as well. So a big thank you to you two for joining us again, and a big thank you to all of you for listening, and we'll hopefully see you next week in the Natural History Cupboard. Goodbye.
Farewell.